everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of October 2nd and what we have titled The Wild Feminine Returns. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects we'll talk about today are Venus trine Pluto, conjunct Mars, and square Saturn. We're calling that wild feminine power. We'll also talk about the full moon in Aries, which is the wild woman in action. And then lastly, we'll talk about Mercury conjunct the Sun in Libra. And so this we're deeming poetic awareness. And so as always, please remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's literally happening in your life right now and your personal astrological makeup. Notice what resonates with you most and always use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off this week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. Well, our lunar lady is still in her waxing cycle as we start the week off in the watery realm of Pisces. And then on Wednesday, she's going to arrive into the take action sign of Aries, which we are going to have that full moon magnificence on Thursday, which we are going to talk about much more later in this episode, which coincidentally we have a special event happening that day, which we will mention as well. So then we're going to move on Friday, which will be Saturday for some. The moon's going to move into the comfy earth sign of Taurus, where we'll spend most of our weekend before she squeaks into chatty Gemini on late Sunday evening. So Shawna, tell us about the book that has inspired this episode's quotes.
Yeah, so with this episode, this week we have a lot of Venusian, a lot of Venus action going on. And so we are featuring in this episode quotes and inspiration from the best-selling classic Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It's myths and stories of the wild woman archetype. So I'm really excited about this. I think you guys will really enjoy this. Although this book was specifically written for women and it uses that term often, and we'll use that term, the wild woman archetype, we're using it in the context of the feminine archetype. So in other words, this is about feminine energy. It's not necessarily about gender. And this book is amazing. So I know that you will enjoy it. Yeah. And so that being said, we're excited to jump into these transits with you all. One last note before we do, if you want to get the show notes for this episode, and then every week with the details of the specific dates of the transits, the tarot cards that Mel has pulled, and the quotes that I've selected, you can get that by becoming a patron of the show. You can find out more about that on our Facebook page or Instagram page, Feminine Principle Podcast, or at feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes, because the show notes can be of great help. I know personally I have been using them. So
Me too.
We'd love to share those with you. And we'd love if you became a patron of the show and show your appreciation. So yeah, we have another special thing coming on the works, right, Shawna? You want to tell them about that?
I do. Yeah. We're so excited. So we will be hosting a Facebook Live event to share more about us and how we got into astrology. That's happening Thursday, October 5th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is 4 p.m. Universal time on Thursday the 5th. And then Friday, October 6th, it's going to be at 2 a.m. Australian Eastern time. So if our Aussie friends are up early or late, you'll catch us as well. So this is really cool because you get to know more about us and you can join us. That'll be this week. Again, it's Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are at. And you can find more about that on our Facebook page, Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes, we are going live during the full moon. So we're bringing our full moons to live to you, and we're looking forward to it, to share a little bit more about ourselves, but also to open up for a live Q&A at the end. So any questions that you might have for us, we'd love to answer. So please check us out. Once again, that is Thursday, October 5th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and that will be on our Facebook page, the Feminine Principle Podcast. So yeah, Shawna, let's start this episode, and kick it off with our first, set of transits here. We are having quite a Venus week, aren't we? So Venus is going to be getting a workout this week. We're going to start off the episode by, talking about, Venus, who's going to be trining Pluto in Capricorn, will be conjuncting Mars in Virgo, and will be squaring Saturn in Sagittarius, and what we have titled Wild Feminine Power. So just a little specifics of when all this is going to happen. We're first going to have Venus trine Pluto on Tuesday, October 3rd at 12:06 p.m. Pacific time, which is 7:06 p.m. Universal time, and Wednesday the 4th at 5:06 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that trine is going to happen at 16 degrees Virgo and Capricorn. Then we're going to have Venus, who's going to conjunct Mars in Virgo on Thursday, October 5th. Same day we have our full moon, and Shawna and I go live. That's going to be October 5th at 9:53 a.m. Pacific time. Well, that's interesting. So this will be conjunct right when we're out there. Which is 4:53 p.m. Universal time. And then Friday the 6th at 2:53 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 19 degrees Virgo. And then lastly, we have Venus, who's going to square Saturn in Sagittarius on Sunday, the 8th at 5:54 a.m. Pacific time, which is 12:54 p.m. Universal time and 10:54 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that square is going to happen at 22 degrees Virgo and Sagittarius. So yeah, Shawna, kick us in with your first quote.
Awesome. So it's a long one, but it's an awesome quote. This is from one of the stories within the book. It's called Seal Skin, Soul Skin, and it's about returning to the self. The process of retrieving the treasure and figuring out how to replenish oneself develops 4 vital constructs in the psyche. When this dilemma is met head on, and the descent to the Rio Abajo Rio, the river beneath the river, is made, it fiercely strengthens our resolve to strive for conscious reclamation. It clarifies over time what it is that is most important to us. It fills us up with the need to have a plan for freeing ourselves psychically or otherwise, and to enact our newly found wisdom. Finally, and most importantly, it develops our medial nature, that wild and knowing part of psyche that can also traverse the world of soul and the world of humans. And so I love this quote for this particular Venus transit because, like Mel said, Venus is getting a workout here. And so Venus is making contact first with Pluto, which is, it's really, the Plutonian part is about this strengthening our resolve and clarifying. And it's also about breaking free psychically from things that are not a good fit. And then the Mars comes in to bring more fierceness and strength and resolve. And then the Saturn portion that happens towards the end of the week is, it's like the sturdiness that comes from all of this inner work that we're doing, because it is like the inner part is happening more in the beginning of the week. And this is all related to how it is that we relate with others with the Venus aspect, but it's really like what brings us joy and what brings us this sense of like inner satisfaction so that we can relate with others. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's true. Cause, Venus has to do with our relating ability, how we relate with others, how we relate and are receptive and sensitive with ourselves. it basically is getting a little bit of a makeover, this week. And not only relationships, this can also has to do with relationships, that, not just love relationships, but it could be business relationships that can have to do with, money and how that is kind of brought into our lives. And all that is kind of connected on our own relationship to ourselves and others, that kind of like worth, aspect. So Shawna, let's break this down since we have three different transits here, and they're not all jumbled up onto each other. They seem like they are evenly spaced out through the week, and we have this progression of Venus. So it's like Venus is developing her own story this week. And so our first encounter is going to be with that trine with Pluto. And I think it's interesting, Shawna, that the moon is actually going to be in Pisces at that time, and is going to be exactly conjunct Neptune. Mm-hmm. So we have our emotional feeling, behavior trigger faculty is essentially in this watery merging depth, which may not see so clearly, but at the same time is able to merge with something, outside of itself, in that watery realm. I think like this first part of the transit is really going to be opening us up to new ways of merging with others, or like attuning to certain patterns that we have relating to others, and maybe helping us go beyond that, or getting into our own nice rhythm with someone else. Or it could be a great time of really healing any suffering that has been going on in a relationship, especially with that Pisces energy and that Neptune action. And since Pluto's there to help essentially, and not really hurt in this scenario, I think that we might be able to overcome some of our Venus issues with a little more, compassion in how we handle other people, especially with this Pisces Neptune influence. So how do you see those things playing in, Shawna, and the moon especially?
Yeah, I like the word that you used, attunement, Mel, or attunement. I feel like the moon in Pisces allows us to attune to ourselves via the other, whether that is a romantic partner, a business partner, or just people that we have to interact with in our day to day. Like all of those people are in the Venus realm. And so it's like, because Pluto is related to our unconscious triggers, and those things, Pluto actually allows for attunement. Both the Pisces element and the Pluto element, they allow us to attune internally to what it is that we're feeling in response to someone talking to us in a certain way. And so I'm wondering if this may bring up like an ability to suss out, okay, what is it that, like, am I feeling something because it's something that's being triggered inside of me, or am I feeling something that is actually the other person is bringing their stuff, their agenda onto me, and kind of like separating out, okay, like, is this about me or is this about the other person? And sometimes it's a little mix of both. But I think the Pluto and the moon in Pisces bring this heightened emotional sensitivity that if we allow ourselves to really listen and to notice how it is that we're responding and how it is that we're feeling as we interact with people, that we can actually transform Pluto, some of those feelings, some things that maybe like where there's resentment or where there is like anger that comes up even because someone's coming at you in a certain way.
Yeah. Or even, or any type of guilt that might be involved in a relationship as well, which is all centered around that resentment too. And so, you're right, Shawna, like the trine is really allowing these things to kind of come to light and us being able to work with them. Especially being able to, especially with all that Pisces energy. Once again, like you said, Shawna, you're like, how do I decipher what is my own shit and what someone else's is? And this can be a little rough, when we have things such as, the moon in Pisces conjunct Neptune. It makes things a little squirrely in that area. It's hard to tell if you are the person, essentially initiating this or if it's coming from outside of you. But either way, you kind of got to deal with it. So, it's a great time to be aware of your intuition and basically, stay diplomatic with whatever's going on in your life or the strides you're trying to, make. And, I look at this as like basically an opportunity, to like dive in and tackle a lot of the undercurrents of our love lives or our, business relationships, how we can tap into that power or see where that power might be tapping into us. And we are able to kind of reroute that a little bit or work it in our favor or use that to basically kind of power up in a sense, when it comes to our Venus faculties. And Venus is in Virgo, right? Venus is, sussing out, what is practical in our relationships and our love affairs and our business practices. It's asking us, like, are we looking at all the details or is it fuzzed over by that Pisces, Neptune, viewpoint? Because, Shawna, we've had so many, contacts, especially with Neptune. In the last couple of weeks. Yeah. And Venus has been up in that mix. So, could be an element of like what you've been dealing with in the past couple of weeks that will come up, and kind of make themselves known and be able to be worked through a little bit there. So, so that being said, let's move on to the next aspect. So Venus basically makes this Pluto trine that Shawna and I were just talking about. And then she goes on to conjunct Mars, in Virgo. So we get this double Virgo dose at 19 degrees Virgo and coincidentally happens right on the Aries full moon. And so because we have that Aries full moon, and we're going to talk about this in much more detail in the next segment, because that full moon is in Libra, essentially. It's in Aries, but it's on that Libra polarity, and that is Venus territory. So I find it very, appropriate in the way that the universe always works to give us a Venus, Mars conjunction during a full moon, in Libra and Aries. So Shawna, how do you see the conjunction kind of coming into place, especially with that full moon energy?
Yeah, it is a really interesting, double polarities are happening. It's like the Venus-Mars polarity, the yin and yang, and then the full moon polarity, and especially with the full moon being Aries and Libra. So both of these speak to me about what it is that that we're attracted to, what it is that draws us in, or draws us to it. That's Venus. Venus is like what it is that we're allured towards or that we're repulsed towards even. And then Mars is what it is that we want. It's like, okay, I'm going after this versus I want it. And so these two meeting, it's really interesting. We may have this ability to like go towards what it is that we really crave. We may do that in a more active and dynamic way. It's in the sign of Virgo though. So Virgo's more practical, systematic, and calculated in a way even. And so I don't know, this could go one of two ways. It could be more that we're like vacillating between, wanting to satisfy our pleasure principle, Venus, versus going after what it is that we really want and doing that in a strong way and being assertive. I think that the Virgo element really grounds this energy so that it may be a bit more harmonious to where we can, like the conjunction, just really blend these energies of the yin and yang and find equanimity. Yeah,
because it's interesting, Shawna, because with any conjunction, we're essentially getting a fusion of the two energies, right? They merge and become one. And it sounds so beautiful for Venus and Mars. But we do have to keep in mind that Venus is in Virgo and, that is the area of her fall. So she doesn't really quite work as well as she would like to in this zone. So chances are there might be more of a a Mars overtone in this scenario. So we might be a little overtly aggressive when it comes to what it is that we're attracted to. So just be aware, physical attraction could be high at this time. Like you might just see something and want to go after it, or you're just gonna feel compelled to act on something that attracts you. But I would just make sure that you especially during a full moon, like you're saying, Shawna, we have this polarity, we have this other attraction, we have all these things that are attracting us. And we just got to make sure we're attracted to the right thing, and that what we are like aggressively going after right now is essentially not going to be our own fall in the end. And especially since we have Venus square, Saturn coming down the line, which we'll talk about in just a second. So, midweek, we're talking about, really, going after what it is we're attracted to, what we're, being motivated by what attracts us or what we find beautiful in life or, we want more of, in our day to day, what it is we want to open up to essentially. And we're going to be hopefully directed wisely by these things that we're opening up to. And hopefully they're going to be of practical consideration because we are in Virgo, land. But this is also a great time, speaking of Virgo and Virgo's ability for a detail and all that fine work, and what makes Virgos fine artists is because they're able to like tap into those, just every single detail and dot that I, cross that T. And I think that these are the type of transits that if there's any of you artists or creative, people out there, that you can really tap into this energy this week and, make some really beautiful, and possibly some very practical pieces of art. So yes, I see how that conjunction might work. What do you think, Shawna?
Yeah, I agree with the art piece, especially, and needing to temper ourselves as far as what it is that we go after. I think the more that we do the Plutonian foundational work earlier in the week, where we get really clear, or as clear as we can at least, on being honest with ourselves, and if a relationship dynamic is healthy or unhealthy, or if it works for us versus if it doesn't, or if there's things that we need to work out inside of ourselves, I think that brings the most healthy action moving forward when Venus and Mars do come together.
Yes, I think that's very wise advice. And we are talking about earth signs here. So choices made, actually show up in the physical world. Like this, it's not all speculation. It's not just passion. It's not just, these are real things that basically get manifested. So that being said, so we basically trine that Pluto, she conjuncts that Mars, and now she's gonna square some Saturn in Sagittarius on Sunday, which you're gonna feel over the weekend and possibly into Monday, maybe even Tuesday of next week. And so it's interesting, Shawna, because I find the moon, when Venus squares Saturn, the moon is going to be in later degrees Taurus, and the moon is exactly in conjunct Saturn to the degree.
Oh,
so here we are, and we were just talking about, Shawna, before we got on the horn with you guys, we were talking about in conjuncts and semi-sextiles, and if that sounds foreign to you guys out there. It's based on this principle of aversion and not really seeing something and not being able to look at it as clearly. Maybe you see it out of the corner of your eye, but you don't really, interact with it, or you don't know how to. And so I find it interesting that our feeling faculty and our behavioral self and our reactive self in this comfy Taurus land, is basically not looking at this Saturn, which is like, okay, you gotta look at the big picture. You gotta step out. You gotta take risks, you have to, but you also have to be practical, with these risks and these love affairs, or this, opening up to other people, or these financial considerations. And so I feel that the weekend is going to bring some things into play that are going to challenge us in a way, and maybe really prod us to have to look at something, a little differently, or adjust the way we emotionally react, to these ideas of Saturn, and especially within our relationships. So, Shawna, what do you think about that, with that square to Saturn and that moon action?
Hmm. Yeah, that's kind of crazy that the moon is exact to the degree. So to break it down, I think whenever I see Venus squaring Saturn, this says to me it's a reality check time. It's a time reality check for what it is that works for us or doesn't work for us within how it is that we relate to other people, how it is that we facilitate our finances, how it is that we value ourselves and our time even. And so I think that as we're in the beginning of the week, getting attuned and honest with ourselves through Pluto, and then going after something that we really want and desire with the Mars and Venus coming together. And then when Venus finally comes to Saturn, it's like, okay, wait, like really in practical terms, does this actually work or does it not work? And it's a square. So whenever there's a square, we can't typically avoid the situation. We are confronted with reality, which is Saturn. And so, this can actually be a really beautiful time where something that does work really well is solidified. But if there's practical things that need to be taken care of, whether that's conversations that need to be had, logistics or details, and sometimes this can be like really hard conversations to have, but very important conversations to have. And so, yeah, with the moon in Taurus, it's like we may not want to have those conversations. We may just want to like pull the covers up and get really comfortable and ignore that reality of Saturn.
Yeah.
But I think that we're supported when we do. Like this work feels really important to have these hard conversations and to be honest with ourselves about what works well and what doesn't work so well.
Yeah, I think that's very dead on in many ways, Shawna. And to play on that Taurus energy and, and Saturn asking to solidify, and especially solidify that big picture, Sagittarius and what it is we're going after. Chances are like a commitment can come up during this time, to make something real in this big picture and, or we want a commitment to someone else and it's not quite working. And so essentially I feel that this square, has us really reassessing like the long-term, viability of our relationships. And how we interact with others and our own test of patience in a sense with this bigger picture reality that we're trying to formulate here. Because like Shawna was saying, like we might be in that comfy Taurus zone and we're like, okay, we don't want to look at this. We don't want to look at the practical problems and like really, I've been trining all week and I conjuncted and I felt so ready. And then now I'm like, oh, what is this? And so, we might be confronted with, not wanting to change or assess the practicality of the big picture, or we might be confronted with something that is, essentially asking us to commit to that big picture, which is not always the easiest thing for, people to do, especially if you're not, like if you're a Sagittarius, and you're more like, let me just run free and run wild with those wolves. And, like the idea of commitment, might be like, oh, I don't know. Like I like you and all, but, and so these are the types of things that can really come up right now. And it doesn't even have to be like a relationship either. You could be testing out a business partnership, or you can, be testing out, your finances might be strained right now and you're not looking at like what it is you need to do. You're staying in this Taurus comfort zone. And it's like, well, maybe if I just plod along this path that I've been doing the whole time, I'll be able to do this. But really it's like, no, you have to look at this big picture. You have to get practical. You have new concerns. So let's assess this. So just know that during the weekend, like we might have made like a lot of strides here and there with our Venus related stuff. But that the weekend might come around and challenge us a bit. And to be honest, relationships might feel a little withdrawn right now. And romance might seem a little harder to grasp onto. In a sense, but that's okay because we're trying to get this big picture reality. We're trying to hone in on the details, trying to look at where we're going, and see what suits us best, in this long term, consideration, and then really push for the partnerships that we can commit to. and assess that. And so this square, like you're saying, Shawna, squares ask us to take action. We cannot ignore this. So this is just a bump in the road to make us assess these things, in their own practical consideration and how that fits in our long-term big picture.
Yeah, I like that. This is definitely a time to focus on your efforts and your energy on the people and situations that you know are really solid, that you can trust, that are there for you, that you want to build upon. Yes,
absolutely. Because essentially, especially with that Pluto transit that's helping us along in the beginning of it, it's like, this is the week where we can learn to set limits and boundaries in our relationships, in a sense, for our greater good and our vision down the road. Like you were saying earlier, Shawna, our time, is precious. And how we use that, especially with other people and what we give, and what we're receiving, and if that's a reciprocal type of thing. And how practical these, connections really are for us, on our day-to-day reality, such as Virgo and Venus, Virgo and Venus, Venus and Virgo. Just know, so I guess the bottom line to this essentially is that if your relationships make it through this week, you're good as gold. These things are great. And you can stick with those, cause you made some real work. And if anything happens to fall away from you, that's okay, because it's not practical for you in the long run. And, if that happens, just know, you're still headed to the better destination.
Yeah. No matter what. I agree. I concur. I've actually had some, more than one relationship break up around, a Venus Saturn square. And it was a bummer, but I was like, oh, this is not, it happened, it coincided, and I was like, oh, this isn't working for me. So it reflected that energy.
Perfect. Yeah. It's not working for you. And it's sad to see you go, but something way better for me is coming on down the road, and I got to open myself up to it, right?
Always.
Yes, and that's primarily what Venus does, is she opens herself up. And so if we are in the wrong commitments for us, then we aren't able to open up to what is right. So just keep that in mind as you go along this week. So that being said, Shawna, let's talk about these tarot cards, because that's going to put a whole another type of spin on this Venus. Or actually, it's probably going down the same line. So the two cards I drew for all these Venus action that we're having is the Seven of Swords as the focus, and the Judgment card as the grounding. And if you've been listening to the last couple podcasts, you know that Judgment's been coming up lately. We are coming to an awakening. We're coming to truth within ourselves, and our renewal around our own lives. And we're constantly being pushed towards that, especially during this Virgo season. When everything is so real and we can't ignore it otherwise. But the Seven of Swords there is essentially can either mean, on the shadow side of things, there's some type of deception going on, or there's some type of avoidance, or we're not fully honoring the truth of something. And if we hide over here and pretend like everything's fine, or we keep up this, essentially, lie we tell ourselves, or a secret we might keep from someone else, we can't really be, we can't really renew ourselves. We can't follow our own truth and our own integrity, and we can't have forgiveness in our lives unless we essentially acknowledge these things that we might be hiding ourselves, or so that someone else might be. And this is just the shadow side of it. There's a bright side too, with we can strategize and plan for this renewal and our personal freedom. But I think with Venus involved, there might be a little just hiccups along the road where certain things might just come to light that really influence the decisions that we make this week. Shawna, how do you see these two cards playing together?
Yeah, so these two cards to me are really about integrity. This is not a time to fuck around and be like, oh, well, it's like, I have a weird feeling about this, but I think it'll be okay, and I'm just not going to worry about it. Like, this is not that time. Like, if you have, that's what these cards are saying to me, at least, is if you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is trying to deceive you, but it means that you need to acknowledge it. And it's important to have that conversation or to bring it up or to be like, hey, like, I feel weird about this. And, you know, can we talk about this? And when you do that, then the Judgment card comes in and there can be that renewal. I mean, the Judgment card, the image in the Rider-Waite is this image of these people that are like joyously nude and they're just like being reborn, and they're like, there's no need for the coverage of the clothing because they're accepting what is. And so
exactly.
So
I love that. Yeah, no, that's perfect because I love the way, yes, Shawna, that's perfect with the card and Judgment and how the nudity there and the trumpets are blowing and you're just like rejoicing in what is and the truth of it, and there's nothing to hide under. And the Seven of the Swords is really kind of hiding something. So it's time to, you know, strip us of our clothes in a proverbial sense and let it all out. Let it all out there. You know, what do you got to lose? Because if you lose something this week, it's really wasn't the best for you to begin with. And once you do, you're going to feel that naked truth that you knew the whole time, but has been hiding, you know, in that Seven of Swords energy. And you know what I love about the Seven of Swords, and there's not a whole lot of things people can say about that right away, is that it really is about using your own, healthy self-interest in the matter. Because, you know, the positive side of this card is really to use your own wit and your own strategy and your own planning ability, in order to kind of manipulate the situation to your own, self-interest. And I don't mean that in, you know, obviously that can be done in a shifty kind of way, but that if that's done right, then we're really, you know, molding ourselves, to what it is that we want and, you know, how we see our lives and plan for that and who we really want to interact with. So I think that if you have that healthy self-interest this week and really make the hard changes or say the things that might not be so pleasant to say, you know, chances are we're going to end in a peaceful ending, or at least be able to, begin to use our own strategy for that new beginning that's coming along the way. But either way, there's a shift. There is a truth. There's an integrity that comes out this week with all this, these Venus transits. And what's hidden is going to essentially be on the table. So if you're hiding anything, or if you think someone's hiding something from you, chances are this week is where it's going to come out, and there's going to be a new, fresh, perspective around that or around that person. And it could be something you move on for, or it could be something where you can now right those wrongs or right those past actions or get it all out on the table. We're naked in front of each other. I forgive you. Let's start fresh, you know? Like, these are the types of things that, can come up with these cards, I think. So yeah. A lot of Venus. We've focused on so much Venus here. So just a couple questions to take away that, I would ask myself about all these Venus transits. You know, I would ask myself, how do my relationships, and or my finances look? Is there some healing that needs to be done? Some action that needs to be taken? Some boundaries that need to be reinforced? I would ask, what am I attracted to that is of real value? How can I plan a strategy to take action on those desires? And then lastly, I would ask, with all this Venusian energy this week, how can I open up to my wild feminine power? How can I free myself with this newly found receptive wisdom? And so these are the questions you can ask yourself, and I'll ask myself, and that's what we have the show notes for as well. If you become a patron, you can ask yourself these questions all week long. So that being said, let's move on to our next segment, and that is the full moon in Aries. And that is going to, it's actually what we're calling Wild Woman in Action. which is very much a full moon in Aries, I would say. So just some exactitudes on that. That full moon is going to happen Thursday, October 5th at 11:40 a.m. Pacific time, which is 6:40 p.m. Universal time, and Friday, the 6th at 4:40 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 12 degrees Aries, that full moon. So Shawna, kick us in with your next quote.
So this, again, is from Women Who Run with the Wolves. This is one of the stories called Crescent Moon Bear. And it's about the ability to actually embody healthy action and anger and fierceness. A woman remembers that she can be both fierce and generous at the same time. Rage is not like a kidney stone. If you wait long enough, it will pass. No. You must take right action. Then it will pass and more creation will come to your life. So I thought this was so perfect for a full moon in Aries, because Aries has this fierce warrior attitude. There's always this element of working with courage. And then at the same time, because it is a full moon, we look at the polarity. We look at the sun being in the sign of Libra, and Libra is immensely generous. Libra is kind. And so with the full moon always brings out certain paradoxes. It's like, okay, how can we be in both energies and both opposites at the same time? And it's this time of finding equanimity within both. And because it's a full moon in the sign of Aries, we're focused more on that warrior fierceness. And because also, like we spoke about earlier, we have the Venus and Mars coming together, like there is this time to really embrace healthy assertiveness and to look at anger and rage as it comes, and then to work with it in a generous way.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that during this Venus week, that's heavily Venus, we have this full moon, and especially in a sign that is, like you're saying, Shawna, that is so independent, that is so, its own person, is courageous, and is able to go after and get what it wants, essentially, and really not in any type of, consideration always to another person, which is, cause here we have that sun in Libra, which is basically our polarity here. We're having Libra, Aries polarity, and Libra is ruled by Venus. So that the sun is really kind of the focal point, I think, in this transit, even though we are having the full moon and it's in Aries. I think what we're going to learn a lot is going to be from that, Venus, or that Libra sun and that Venus vibe and all these Venus transits. And then the fact that we have Mercury conjunct, the sun, in Libra, which we're going to talk about later in the program. So I feel like this full moon is really tied around coming out on the Libra end of things, more so than the Aries, or tapping into the Aries so that we can come up on the Libra side of things, in a sense. And so just to reiterate kind of what's happening there, like Shawna, you were saying, we have, Venus, conjunct Mars only hours earlier, in this full moon, but right before it goes exact. And when we're going to be live on Facebook, if we can all experience this together. And essentially, we'll open that up for Q&A, then for sure. And so we also have, Venus, who is going to be essentially squaring Saturn at that point too. So this is absolutely something that's going on. We have, essentially we have, Chiron, who's tapping into that Venus and Mars, action too, that even though there's not talking to the moon, there's so much, basically what I'm saying is there's so much element at play during this full moon of not just that Libra, Aries polarity, but also within Virgo, and that Pisces action. And I find it very interesting that we are having this full moon, And even though it's not the exact degrees, essentially it's bringing up the same polarity issues that were triggered last week, when we had the, Jupiter-Uranus, opposition. So here we have another opposition, basically, different planets, but they're contacting those same issues. That relating versus that independence, that courageousness, in choices that need to be made, the Libra in choice and being an indecision and having the courage, Aries, to go out there and make some moves and take some action. It's a polarity about giving and receiving. Like you said earlier, Shawna, Libra loves to give, is very generous. And Aries likes to kind of go out for what it wants, like I don't necessarily need to give to you. I'm trying to give to myself here. And so, there's this polarity there that I find very interesting, having to deal with our own needs versus, possibly someone else's. And here we are in this Venus week. So that's interesting to me. Just how we're basically that full moon cause a full moon is a time of release where basically something is apexing, it's bright in the sky. We either need to kind of fully embrace that or we need to release it in a sense. And so either we're like embracing this idea of independence and courage and being able to stand on your own, which could be a sense walking away from some of those Venus, issues. Or it could, be a time where we release some of those needs. Before I was talking about the commitment. And sometimes you can't always just do your own thing and be your own person and that independent, wild woman. When you have other people in your life, that are trying to look at the big picture with you and you have to have them in your considerations as well. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this a little bit. As far as that Aries is concerned. So what do you think about that, Shawna?
Yeah. So I like the full moon. It is this time of full engagement. It's like, okay, whatever is happening, we're in it, we're feeling it. And, the full moon, it does bring up shadow elements sometimes. So I am wondering if the full moon, especially because like you mentioned, Mel, with, we're still, playing off of that Uranus-Jupiter opposition in Aries and Libra. It's like, I wonder if we may realize places where we've been overly passive or where we have, given away our power or given away our inner authority in some way. And we're like, hey, wait, I want to take that back.
I need that.
I need that. Or, where maybe situations like that are kind of like blown up out of proportion, overemphasized for us to see, which is what the full moon does. It lets us see all of these things that have been brewing underneath the surface. And I think the Aries portion, it's really like this reminder that the feminine energy is not passive. And I think that there's kind of like this weird, like sometimes nuanced difference because Libra energy is more passive. It's more passive aggressive. It's more like, well, what do you want to do? I want to eat whatever you want to eat. I want to make you happy, And, Aries is, and that's nice and that's wonderful. And at the same time, it's important that we do say every once in a while what it is that we want to eat, what are our preferences. And, I think that the feminine, essence, not necessarily gender, but like the feminine energy can kind of get boxed into this area of being like passive and appeasing and that kind of thing. And the reality, of feminine energy is that it's actually very strong and powerful. And there's like this creative, oomph behind things. And so I think with the Aries moon, we get to, and like, especially the Aries and then that Mars Venus coming together, we get to feel that oomph and we're like, yeah, like it's an empowerment of the feminine, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Because it's interesting, Shawna. So basically our full moon ruler here, Mars, is conjunct the ruler of the sun. So we have the two rulers basically conjunct. and talking to each other. And it's like, okay, so here, we're in opposition over here. We're in sign opposition over here, but the planets, as the ruler is essentially conjunct there. And once again, like I was saying earlier, you know, Venus in Virgo is not in the necessary best position for it to be in. And here we have this full moon in Aries, contacting Mars. So that Mars energy is going to be ramped up even more. So we're going to be on the Mars heavy side of things versus the Venus side, I think. And I think with all these Venus transits, we have to get in touch with that Venus side of things. But that could be having to change that Venus side in a way. Like it's not working so well right now. And so with all this Libra, energy, and then that Mercury conjunct the Sun, which we're going to get to, will hopefully help us also in that Venus realm as we intellectually, you know, get in touch with those Venusian properties, that live in Libra. But you know what I find interesting, Shawna, just a little history about this moon, because it is a special moon in a sense. It's known as the harvest moon. It's the harvest full moon. So it's basically the closest full moon, that we have to the autumn equinox, and this is in the northern hemisphere. So for us up on this north end. And in the harvest moon is always known as like the type of time of year where the moon is kind of big in the sky and it's kind of orange and it's like, it just seems bigger and brighter and like kind of more warm, but yet ominous at the same time as it squeaks up over the horizon. And so I just wanted to give for our listeners out there that are in the northern hemisphere and kind of viewing this happening, I just kind of wanted to give some information around like why it is we see the moon that way, and to really tie into the fact that this is a harvest full moon. And we were talking about harvesting things just in general, in our Venus lives and our love relationships. And, it's almost, I feel like we're harvesting, in a grand sense right now. But just some interesting little tidbits about this moon. It's interesting because it's orange color. So basically why it looks so orange and why it looks so big is that when we have these like equal day, equal night, when we have these equinoxes, and especially in this autumn one for the northern hemisphere, basically the moon rises about 15 to 20 minutes earlier than it normally does, just by where the ecliptic is right now. So it looks much bigger than it normally would because it's rising quicker on the horizon, and the horizon basically kind of tricks that view. And it's also interesting, of why it looks big and orange in color is because it's basically a physical effect. Because when we look at the sky, basically all the light scatters, and that's why we see that blue in our atmosphere. But when we look at the horizon, it's like a denser atmosphere and it's thicker. And so the blue kind of, doesn't get as much action. And then that red comes in and is able to flicker through the light. So that's why, with our sunsets, we see that kind of orange, and that red is because the atmosphere is thicker there and doesn't have that same dispersion, of that blue and letting that blue in. So no, the moon is not orange and red. No, the moon's not huge for just these 2 days. It just happens to be rising, quicker. That makes it look bigger. And then that horizon, scatters the blue, light, effectively enough to let that red light pass through. And so that's why we see that kind of yellow or orange or reddish hue come for the moon. So take a look when we on this day, on the 5th, or even on the 4th, the night before or the night after, because it happens for a couple days. Go take a look at that moon because it is essentially harvesting, and that's why they call it the harvest moon, is because it rises quicker, it's bigger, it's kind of brighter, and the farmers essentially had longer time to continue their harvest based on, the moon providing them the light to do so. So that is a long-winded story, but I wanted to share that with everyone because I found it fascinating. And how can we tie this harvest essentially into what it is that we're talking about on, kind of a symbolic level.
Yeah, I love that. And it really speaks to the value of perspective. Cause we can look at these on a chart. Like as we record the podcast, I look at the chart in front of me and the aspects that the planets are making and all of that. And that's very important, but also important is what does it actually look like outside? I mean, that's how astrology started, was in Mesopotamia. They actually started to notice in the sky what things look like. And it does look very different from one hemisphere to the other. And so it's kind of cool. Like, we're all experiencing the Aries full moon with the sun in Libra. And so we all get to feel this like fierce feminine energy, but we do experience it in different ways depending on where we're actually located and what our access is and what our visual, what our orientation is. So
yeah. Yeah, because that was very important to the ancients. They don't have the same computer systems calculating whatever. They're like, that is a big ass moon in the sky. That must be important. So just know, like, in just the way we view it and how it looks, is this moon is kind of, important. I mean, they all are, but visually it has that much more effect. And so essentially we are kind of harvesting something in our lives, especially here in the Northern Hemisphere. So tying that back in with the moon and our full moon here, let's kick in with some of those, the tarot cards, just to kind of, add a little more depth to this full moon, for us to talk about. And that is, I drew the Hierophant as the focus and the Wheel of Fortune as the grounding. And once again, I find this really interesting, Shawna, because I keep getting this kind of like nudge at some type of commitment or an alliance of some sort, or an opportunity around that is, kind of for our own spiritual advancement, in some way. And there's many things to attribute to the Hierophant, but for some reason, just with this Libra, Aries energy, that all this Venus energy, I like something about commitment is really, because, essentially marriage, if anybody's getting proposed to this week or trying to take the relationship to a next level, the Hierophant basically operates in the realm of tradition and, institutions, which marriage is absolutely an institution. And Libra can see that, and Aries might be that wild woman that's like, you ain't gonna tie me up, and so there can be like a polarity within that, but that's just one facet of it. Not everybody's getting proposed to this week, but, these kind of things were coming up in my mind. So Shawna, what do you think of these two cards together?
Yeah, so it is interesting because the Hierophant is about a traditional structure. And so it makes me wonder what traditional structures, what belief systems, what do we identify with? And that because of the Wheel of Fortune is the supporting card, is the grounding card, I feel like a sense of gravity with this full moon. It's like, okay, what or who are we aligning ourselves with? And that is really important. It's aligned with our destiny, with our future. And it may feel like maybe there's even like a certain draw towards commitment, maybe. I don't know, but it feels like whatever it is that we align ourselves with, especially during this full moon, it's important. And so it's not to be taken lightly or casually. I think that Aries can be a more dynamic and free-spirited moving. Like I like to say, Aries people, they don't know where they're going, but they know they're going there, like now. And so that may be something to watch out for, to be, more cautious with like, or maybe not cautious, but just like intentional on what it is that we're committing to and what it is that we're aligning with. Cause it has long-term,
yes, ramifications.
Long-term benefits or ramifications.
Yeah. I'm like the negative. No, I think that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right, Shawna. And it's so interesting to think about with the Aries, just energy in general. Like an Aries, gets out there and is kind of the pioneer. We'll be the first to try something. We'll leap off that, we'll go into this new territory. And the Hierophant is basically saying, like, don't go into any new territory. We're staying right where you conform to what is here and and the system that has been set up. And I don't mean that in a, whatever, but essentially there could be an element of this full moon that is asking us to play within the rules and that you can't, you might feel like you want to take off and do this and be at your own whim and be this independent, forget about you. I'm going to go do what I want. And the Hierophant might be like, it's time to stick, don't go against the grain, essentially, of other people or society, play within the rules. And that's where your fortune is going to lie and where opportunity will be, when you stay within this kind of conformity of sense. And not stifling so much, but sometimes you can't always be that wild horse that wants to take off. Sometimes the most wild, thing you can do is stick around. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree. I had a conversation with, someone last night actually where there was an argument that happened between her and another person, and she was put in a place where she felt angry. She was felt like attacked even in a certain way. And so we were talking about like how to, what does she want to do? Does she want to be like, fuck it and leave? Or does she want to like stick around and figure out what to do with this? And I think, it depends on what she wants. We always have a choice, but it makes me think of these cards. It's like, this is what I was suggesting. I was like, you don't want to leave this situation as like being the victim and being the one that's forced out. You have more power here than you realize. And I think sometimes we have to channel our like anger or our active energy and kind of like work it in the system in order to do what really needs to be done. So it's not about like flying off the handle and going crazy. It's like, okay, how are we going to like, navigate through this in an intelligent way and work within the system that we need to in order to get what we want.
Yes. And that's ultimately Aries' end goal, right? What is it that I want? And sometimes what it is that you want asks for you to play by the rules in order to get it. So, that's kind of what I'm seeing, with these cards in a sense, or, all the different shades that, Shawna and I are putting out there. But ultimately, the Hierophant really, allows you to end up, in a place of, greater knowledge and just get greater spiritual, attunement in a sense based on all these principles. So it's powerful in that sense. And these are two major arcana cards. So, this is once again a powerful full moon. And we have that, we're talking about full moon in Aries, and Aries does represent, an element of crisis in a sense. And so we are going to be working through that. So just know this is kind of a crisis full moon, and you don't need to take that to the next level. Just know that you're going to be confronted with something that you basically have to have the courage to step up, and deal with. And so that being said, some questions to take away, from this full moon, I would ask myself, what right action needs to be taken in my life? Where is the wild woman calling to be set free? How will that affect others? I would ask myself, is someone looking to me for a commitment? How will my life change based on this alliance? Does it speak to my destiny? And then lastly, I would ask, where am I having my own emotional harvest right now? What has culminated and now needs release?
And love
so that's what we're asking here. How can we work with this full moon energy? And we're going to be working through it. We're going to be working through it live. So come on down to Facebook that day. come talk to Shawna and I as we full moon out. In the interest of this not being the longest podcast ever, let's move on to Mercury conjunct, the Sun. And it's, as it does its retrograde dance back and forth. So now it is forward moving and will conjunct our Sun in Libra. And that is what we are titling Poetic Awareness. Very aptly so, I think. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some exacts here. We're going to have that, conjunction, exactly on Sunday the 8th at 1:54 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8:54 p.m. Universal time, and Monday the 9th at 6:54 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that conjunction is going to happen at 15 degrees Libra. So Shawna, kick us in with your last quote.
So this is from the story in Women Who Run with Wolves called La Loba. La Loba means the wolf woman. Each woman has potential access to Rio Abajo Rio, this river beneath the river. She arrives there through deep meditation, dance, writing, painting, prayer making, singing, drumming, active imagination, or any activity which requires an intense altered consciousness. A woman arrives in this world between worlds through yearning and by seeking something that she can see just out of the corner of her eye. And so I thought this was perfect for Mercury conjunct the Sun, because Mercury is our conscious awareness. It's what we know. It's our intellect. And the Sun is our soul and our spirit. It's our vital energy. And when the Sun and Mercury are conjunct, it's said to be that, like, sometimes Mercury, our consciousness, gets burned up by the Sun, so that we have like maybe this intense awareness, but it's like not quite conscious at the same time. It makes me think of this part where she says, we're seeking something that we can see just out of the corner of our eye. And so, this all being in the sign of Libra too, which is about beauty and the arts. And there's like this, certain element of poeticness when it comes to Libra.
Shawna, I think it's so interesting that we have this, Mercury Sun conjunction in Libra right at, not right after, but pretty close after that full moon in Aries. And I find it very interesting because, there is this type of energy. So there's this type of energy where creation basically follows crisis. And it's so true. And speaking as a musician and an artistic person myself, some of the most beautiful things that were born of me came during or shortly after a crisis. And sometimes right before. I've actually made things that were crisis oriented and the crisis happened like the next day. Like this kind of sensing of it. And so I think it's rather beautiful and so fertile in a sense, this weekend, and especially during this, Mercury, conjunction with the Sun, because we could be coming out of this crisis period of that full moon, in Aries. And this was the perfect time to take that energy and then turn it into a beautiful creation, which is what Libra, wants us to do. So, and we also have the moon in the late degrees of Taurus, that day, and the moon's in a loose trine with, Mars and Venus in Virgo. And we're coming off that square with Saturn, when this happens, essentially. So I really feel that this transit for all our artsy folks out there, and even if you're not artsy, creative, work is very therapeutic. And so I think that this is just a perfect day. Sunday would be a perfect day to get into a project and create something, or create something with another, or, especially in Libra. So, initially that's kind of what I'm seeing, off of this. from that side, from that Libra Venus side. So what do you think about that, Shawna?
I love that creation follows crisis. It's so true. It's so true. And it feels like Libra also creates the sun and Mercury's together in Libra create this like nice soothing effect after we've had that intense full moon and after Mars and Venus have come together and after Venus has finished up all of those connections that she's made throughout the weeks. It's like, yes, now we can soothe ourselves through these creative acts, these things that bring us, like a sense of calm and peace through the aesthetic, through whatever it is that visually stimulates us. It feels definitely like a breather, over the weekend.
Yeah, I think so too, especially coming right after that square with Saturn. I think that's, it's interesting, Shawna, because I think that's after that square with Saturn, Venus's square with Saturn, and then the fact that one of our Venusian representatives, Libra, is going to have that Mercury Sun conjunction. I think we're going to get a lot of awareness around what it is, some of that Venus action is calling for. In our lives, because, depending on where Libra is in your chart, essentially that area is ruled by Venus, and where Venus is right now is triggering that area. So there is this talking that is going on. So I think after all this week and all the things that we will have, kind of encountered and gone through, not only in the Venus realm, but with the full moon, I think when this Mercury comes together with the sun, especially when it gets right in on that conjunction, which we're talking about afternoon time for us Pacific, time people. And it's in that Kazemi point where it's just so close to the sun where it's actually, dignified and like so strong. This is a time where we can get that, all those kind of Venus ideas and plans and decisions, into place. And things are going to start flowing, like that mind is on board with that sun energy and that spirit, like you're saying, Shawna, and that soul flow in a sense. And I think that, being in a positive sign, and when we say positive, we're talking about, male, masculine versus feminine, positive, negative, not in a good, bad way, but, kind of that, just the energy that it brings. I feel like we're going to be a little more optimistic and positive around what it is that we're thinking. And we're probably going to have a little bit more confidence, in the decisions that we're making, cause Libra is also, an area where we make choices around things, based on what it is we're attracted to. And I think once again, this is kind of playing into this whole theme this week is, what we're choosing, what we're committing to, the decisions that we're making. Are they harmonious within us? Do we need to make decisions that, bring in more harmony with our lives and align ourselves with that soul intention as the sun moves through Libra, because it's asking of us basically to find harmony in our lives, find balance, work through certain relationships that need to grow in a way, or make the decisions necessary so we ourselves can grow, and sometimes leave behind something for a more harmonious situation. But I think because that Mercury is right there, we're going to get this we're going to get a mercurial boost in a sense. And when your mind is on board, that's everything. So, chances are you might hear something come out of the woodwork this weekend, and a little good luck or some good news might come your way, that creates a little more harmony or balance in your life. So yeah, what do you think about that, Shawna?
Yeah, it feels like, maybe Sunday afternoon we may get a sense of closure around things that have been happening in the previous week. And especially with Jupiter still being there, hanging out in Libra. It feels like a little boost, a little sense of closure, a little sense of like, okay, I got this. Like, I understand now why things needed to happen the way that they did earlier in the week, and a sense of peace about it.
Yeah. And I love the peace part too, because think about it. We have, even though, the moon is in Taurus and is essentially, not really jiving over there in Libra, they're both ruled by Venus. So we have this, Venusian energy, in the weekend, and we have that stability of Taurus that will help us, kind of calm down from a lot of that Aries action that has taken place from the full moon. And then, after the full moon, basically the moon carries on to conjunct Uranus and oppose Jupiter and a lot of the areas that we've been having. So there's like a sensitive time zone between Thursday and Saturday, between the full moon, the moon conjuncting Uranus and opposing Jupiter, and then that Venus square Saturn energy. So just know that if you find yourself in a place from about, late Wednesday through Saturday or so, we're just sorting some things out. We're just working some things out. And your mind is going to be much clearer on what it is that we have been sorting out, by Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I would plan for the responsibility things, all of the adulting things that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even Saturday maybe. And then, Sunday, I would plan, I'm going to be planning, something nice to do, especially Sunday afternoon, evening, to just chill, to do something creative, to, kind of like a little reward for all of the hard work during the week.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Shawna. It's a time for rebalancing. I mean, the Sunday's the day of rest anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why not rest, rebalance ourselves, get a little creative action going on, and to be honest, if any of you out there had a pretty rough week or you need to work through things, these are the types of transits to where, if you have a therapist or someone you can talk to, this can be very beneficial, I think, for therapy and counseling, right now to achieve more balance in your life. So if you need to talk it out with someone, with a friend, or with a professional, I think this weekend can be very, harmonizing and rewarding in the long run to get your mind on board, conjunct that sun. And really realizing the things that have happened, and to work through them. So, so there is that. But yeah, Shawna, let's talk about these tarot cards real quick. Another interesting, combination that really focuses on balance, I think. And that is, we have the Father or the King of Cups as our focus, and then Temperance as the grounding. And I think both of these cards really represent balance. The King, is asking for emotional balance and control, self-control in those areas. And then, basically Temperance asks us of a balance between the spiritual and the mundane, and just, moderation and patience with life. So I think these two together are kind of rather interesting cards, but can be beautiful, and once again really taps into that art and poetry and music for a greater balance in our life and greater harmony. So what do you think of these two cards together?
Yeah, they definitely speak of balance. And when I see these, I see a question. I see, okay, what is it that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves so that we do feel emotionally centered? Is that time and space? Is that solitary time? Is that going out into the world and doing something fun and interesting? With these cards, I don't see a need to push and accomplish and do something linear or specific. It's more about getting right with yourself and finding that strong, stable core right in the centers. And so if we're feeling emotionally chaotic, that just means that we need to bring things in a little bit. I think that's especially with the King of Cups, there can be this encouragement to really focus on, skillful navigation of the emotional waters.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and that's the thing is that's where the king has to find balance within itself, is because sometimes the king can be a little too oversensitive or insecure and tries to control one's feelings, because we're talking about cups, which emotions lend themselves better maybe to the Queen of Cups, some more so than the king, because the king is that that male energy that can help balance emotions, but at the same time might not be able to fully embrace them. But, so that's when you might want to just remind yourself right now, who's ruling the heart, is the head or is the heart, the ruler here? And so we're just trying to get some balance with that, especially with that Mercury, the fact that it's Mercury, the head essentially is making this conjunction. So how can we basically marry those two things together to achieve that, Libran balance that we're looking for? So yeah, I agree with you, Shawna. This weekend, this time, it's not like go out there, get it, action oriented. It's more like, let's take a minute. Let's enjoy the beauty around us. Let's, retreat into our sensitivities a little bit, just to find our own harmony and balance. So that being said, just a few questions to take away, for this Mercury conjunct Sun in Libra. I would ask myself, where could I benefit from a little poetic awareness right now? How can my mind get creative in order to recognize the beauty in my life? I would ask, how can I fuse my optimism and confidence to create more luck and fortune? Where are my ideas wanting to flow? And then lastly, I would ask, is my heart balanced with my head? How can I honor the two and make the appropriate decisions to bring about more harmony in my life? And so that's, some questions to take away for the Mercury conjuncting the Sun in Libra. So, Shawna, what have we learned?
So much.
So much. Every week, so much. How does our brain remember it all? Well, we've learned that Venus is going to get some serious action this week. She's going to trine Pluto in Capricorn. She's going to conjunct Mars in Virgo, and she's going to square Saturn in Sagittarius. So expect some ups and downs and all arounds in the areas of relationships and, partnerships, business, finances, what you open up to and what you are attracted to. We've learned that the full moon in Aries is around the corner, and Shawna and I will be going live, and you can see two wild women in action on October 5th. We'll do our best, to get out there and share that energy with you. And then we've also learned that Mercury is going to conjunct the Sun in Libra, and it's, really about poetic awareness and maybe taking the time to do a little creative activity or to, just recede into oneself and have a moment to appreciate the beauty in your life and to bring more harmony within. So Shawna, I know you have some action item to take away this week, so please share.
I do. So this action item, I want you to write down the major relationships or commitments that you're working with. And this can be things that have been in your life for a long period of time, or maybe something that's a new opportunity that you're just considering. But I want you to write down these people or these situations that you are in relationship to that require your time, your effort, and your energy. And then next to each one, there can be as many as you like. But next to each one, do a little contemplation, a little journaling on, how do you feel about this commitment, this relationship? Is it enjoyable? Is it light? Is it free? Is it really fulfilling, but it requires a lot of your time and emotional energy? Do you feel uplifted and energized, or do you feel drained? All of these things. And so this is going to be, these most likely will not be all black and white, positive and negative. There may be nuances. But this feels really important, especially to do proactively with all of the Venus transits that we're having, so that you feel very clear on what it is that your commitments and your relationships require of you. And is that enlivening? Or is it not? And, maybe there's a way to find a little bit of balance. That, for some, there's more recharge time that's needed versus others. So that is this week's action item.
I think that's excellent, Shawna. Very ties into all those Venus, things we've been talking about. Perfect.
Yeah, it's important stuff. And so another way that you can get involved is to become a patron of this podcast to show your appreciation and to also get those show notes that Mel and I have mentioned. You can get access to that through our Facebook or Instagram, and you can also just find out more about us and the podcast on those outlets. It's a Feminine Principle podcast. And yeah.
Yeah. So, just like to reiterate what's on those show notes is basically we have the action item that Shawna just presented to you. We have the details of all the transits and when they exactly happen. We have those inspirational quotes. We have the tarot cards, and we have the reflection questions. So there's a lot of meaty content that is given in the show notes. So if you're interested in becoming a patron, please come on down and find more out about that. So, speaking of where to come on down to, let's talk about where you can find us. Cause Shawna and I are here for you throughout the week. And you can find me over at energeticprinciples.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at Energetic Principles. So, Shawna, where can they find you?
You can find me at Neo Feminine Astrology on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All of those, it's just Neo Feminine Astrology.
Yes. So we are out there, ready for you to come on by. And so, yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to this week because I think it's going to be quite a very telling one when it's all said and done, I think. So that being said, do you have any last words, Shawna, for our listeners?
Yeah, sending lots of love and asking that if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That helps us to get higher in the ratings so that we pop up on the search engine so that we can reach even more people. And make sure that you're subscribed so that you get future episodes the moment that they're uploaded.
Yes. And just a reminder, those come out at midnight at Pacific time on Sundays. So, and just a reminder, right, Shawna, we're going to be hosting that Facebook Live event. So if you want to share, you want to find out more about us, and how we got into astrology, and also we want to find out more about you. So we'd love to open up a live Q&A. Once again, that's going to be Thursday, October 5th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is 4 p.m. Universal time, and October the 6th at 2 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. So if you Aussies want to join us, have a drink, stay up late, and we'll see you at 2 a.m. So we're definitely looking forward to that. And once again, that is going to be at our Feminine Principle podcast page, which on Facebook, that is at Feminine Principle Podcast. So all right, everybody, I hope that everyone has a fabulous week, and we'd love for you to contact us, and reach out and share what is happening this week for you with this Venus action, this full moon, and then our Mercury conjunction. So wishing everybody a fantastic week, and we thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.